Good morning. Glad to be with you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for joining us. Senator, you just said on Monday, I believe it was, that the Republican Party can win races by embracing supporters like your father's and making them a big part of the party, and they're doing exactly the opposite. You going to talk about this when you address the convention?
Well, it depends on who you talk to. I'd say there are some skirmishes over some of the rules, but on the platform, we won almost every battle that we were engaged in. Audit the Fed will now be in the platform for the first time. We have language in there that says that we should obey the Fourth Amendment. We're often good in the Republican Party with the Second Amendment, but we have some strict language in there on the Fourth Amendment. We have some language in there also that says, you know what, Congress declares war, not the president, and the president doesn't go to war without the authority of Congress. So these are some things that some people say, oh, that just restates the Constitution. Well, we think it needs to be restated, and these are things that were important to us, and they're now in our platform.
But, by the way, the war thing, I think, is so long overdue, and I think it's great, and I commend your father and you and everybody else who worked on it. Just staying on your father for a second, not only we're going to talk to an 18-year-old man who actually won a delegate seat from Massachusetts in a little while, essentially representing your father, even though it'd formerly be a Romney delegate, and then was X'd out after the fact by rules changes. Isn't the party attempting to change the rules for down the line in 2016 so that, and I don't mean this disparagingly, so that insurgent candidates like Ron Paul and like others really don't have a place at the table?
Yeah, and I don't think it's helpful, to try to exclude delegates and keep people out of the party. Everybody talks about it being a big tent. It needs to be a really big tent, and particularly they need to realize that the whole strategy, I tell them this should be part of your strategy moving forward to make it a little easier to win the presidency, is if we would win a couple of New England states, if we would win California again, or even be competitive. I think the only way we'll be competitive in New England or California is to nominate and elect Libertarian Republicans. I'm always trying to tell the folks up your way who are elected as Republicans, be a little more libertarian, because the libertarian message appeals to independents. For example, we say, look, if your teenager is caught with marijuana, let's don't put them in jail for 20 years. I'm not going all the way to legalization, but I am saying let's don't put them in jail for 20 years. I think that appeals to independents and moderates, and that's how we would get more electoral victories up there.
Hey, Senator Rand Paul, speaking of people from this neck of the woods, Scott Brown, who is a United States Senator and a colleague of yours who's running for re-election, he is not going to the convention today and tomorrow. He apparently has a National Guard thing. Now we're hearing there may be a problem because of the weather kind of thing. It seems that Senator Brown is doing whatever he can not to be there in Tampa and essentially have the platform that you were praising wrapped around him in a pretty tough race with Elizabeth Warren. Think it's a mistake for him to be a no-show?
I heard he was going to a Red Sox game, and every time he goes to a Red Sox game, he ends up winning. I mean,
nice try, Senator. Hey,
Senator, the real tough question is you guys need to ask Elizabeth Warren, is she really a Red Sox fan?
Yeah, that's right.
If
we get that out of the way, I think Scott will cruise to victory.
Well, who do you root for, by the way, in Kentucky? Who do you root for? The Cincinnati Reds? Who do you root for?
Well, I have to root for the Western Kentucky University Hilltoppers because that's my hometown. We don't have a professional team.
We know that.
A lot of people are Reds fans, and my kids have gone up to Reds fans. My kids also like Atlanta, too, so we go down to Braves games. But we've been to Fenway Park. That's one of our favorite parks. We've been there twice, and we've been to Wrigley once. So we love the old ballparks. Don't ever give up Fenway.
Senator Paul, all you got to do to get millions of libertarians out of your side is make sure the government keeps out of women's issues, and you'll be in great shape. You got to get that far. But I want to ask you something about your dad, because every event I've ever been to, convention over the years since your father's been a figure, I have been stunned by the sincerity and the enthusiasm of his supporters. I mean, was he always like this firebrand when you were like a 14-year-old kid?
77 too, by the way.
I know, and he's got all these young people. As Jim just said, 77. All these young people. Was he always like this? I mean, is he like eating Wheaties every morning, or what's the deal?
Well, I introduced him the other night, and I said, you know what? All these young people come here, and everybody wants to know, why does everybody on the internet love Ron Paul? Why do these young people love Ron Paul? And I said, some people say they think it's because he's cool. He's not cool. He's my dad. I know him, and he's not very cool. But I said, you know what? Liberty is cool, and being consistent about liberty, applying it, and people from the left and the right, one of the most common things you'll hear in a Ron Paul thing is, did you come from the left or come from the right? Because conservatives came over and learned about civil liberties, and liberals came over on the foreign policy and then learned about economic liberty. And, what's extraordinary, and the one thing the Republican Party is missing the boat a little bit on is the youngest delegate here, the youngest Republican National Committee woman, is a young lady who's 21 from Maine who's a Ron Paul supporter. They should have her up on the stage. We had her on the stage at the Sun Dome at my dad's rally, but she should really be on the national stage here introducing somebody because it is the youth. And President Obama brought the youth out, and Ron Paul's the only one that seems to have excited them. But it's not something about appealing to the youth because you like the same songs. I mean, he probably doesn't know any of the songs the youth listen to.
Yeah, but let me tell you, when I was with him in New Hampshire, I asked him on air if he was too old to be president, and he challenged me to a bike race the next morning. Hey,
you do not want to accept. You do not want to accept. I have trouble keeping up with him on the bike.
One last question. You talked about the big tent with the Republican Party, and I know people like John McCain and Marco Rubio and a whole bunch of people, obviously Jeb Bush, are talking about Latinos, etc. But when you have a platform that essentially says no abortion in any case, not rape, not incest, not health of the mother, how do you create a broad? Aren't you basically saying this is not a place for the vast majority of women who believe at least in those circumstances?
Well, I just said that. That's a big problem.
They should be entitled to control their own bodies?
I think on social issues, there will have to be some diversity of opinion to get the party bigger, and I think that includes probably New England and probably California as well, states like Illinois. So I think there has to be some room for some disagreement on some of these issues. But I think also foreign policy maybe even bigger than that, to tell you the truth, because on some of the social issues, even though there's a lot of debate, the law has been the same for 40 years now. So I think really, but on foreign policy, if you can get Republicans to like I have encouraged Scott Brown to be on Audit the Fed, and he's not Audit the Fed, Audit the Pentagon, I'm sorry. And I'm pretty sure he's a co-sponsor of Audit the Pentagon, which shows that conservatives and Republicans are serious about looking for waste in military spending as well as domestic welfare spending.
Senator Rand Paul, good luck tomorrow night, and go Hilltoppers. Thanks so much for your time, Senator.
Thank you.